Our second discussant this evening is Professor Christine VanPool from the University of Missouri, Columbia. She is a Southwestern archaeologist whose research has explored the material expressions of many aspects of people's past religions, including shamanism, animism, and concepts of souls. She co-edited the book Religion in the Pre-Hispanic Southwest and co-authored the monograph Signs of the Casas Grandes Shamans. Chris, it's an honor to have you here.
Over the past 2 decades, anthropologists have returned to one of the original topics in anthropology, animism. The concept itself had fallen from favor because of its association with E.B. Tylor and his unilineal scheme. Anthropologists, however, are finding that animism and related concepts such as soul, personhood, and spirit are essential components of many cultures' ontologies. Consequently, anthropologists keep returning to these concepts. This symposium, which focuses on personhood, souls, and soul-like essences, adds to the ever-growing theoretical perspectives concerning indigenous ontologies, and once again shows the utility of such concepts which have a deep history in anthropological thought. Heuristically, the papers can be divided into 2 groups, even though they are interrelated and inform each other. The first several papers by W. Rex Weeks, Mary Capuche, and Brianna Rafidi are either theoretical or have theoretical contributions based on ethnographic analyses. The second group of papers by Heather Smith and Christopher Carr, Christopher Castledine, Mark McGonigal, Anna Novity, Christopher Carr, and Andrew Siddell focus on applying concepts of souls to archaeological remains. I wish I were able to offer a longer discussion of every paper in this symposium because they all have many thought-provoking ideas. I identify some of their major theoretical contributions concerning souls and focus on some of the ways in which these ideas might be broadly applicable. As I read these papers, I was struck with thoughts like, hey, that is true of Zuni Kachinas, or that is quite different than Mascalero Apache, who would never work with the remains of their dead to make corporeal beings. When I mention examples from the Southwest or elsewhere, it is to suggest that there are larger Amerindian themes at work. Let's start with some theories of personhood. In the introduction to this symposium, Christopher Carr informs us that the participants are not using a Western concept of souls in which souls necessarily have an ethereal quality. Rather, they are using soul-like essences based on woodland Indian ontologies. Brianna Rafidi in her paper best illustrates how differently Native Americans conceptualize souls compared to Westerners. It was not unusual for Native Americans to believe that humans had more than one soul. In her cross-cultural analysis with Mary Capuche and Chris Carr, they found that sometimes souls were said to be visible, to have weight, and to affect and be affected by the material world. This necessitates that souls are physically present in the world and impact it. This is an important realization for archaeologists. If, in Native eyes, souls have a physical reality, then they must be dealt with on the physical plane. The archaeologists in this session show us how we are able to see such beliefs and reactions to them in the archaeological record. A. Irving Hallowell was one of the first anthropologists to clearly show that Cartesian ontology is useless for understanding the Ojibwa. The Ojibwa, like other Native Americans, do not adhere to the Cartesian divide that separates matter from spirit. The first paper in this symposium by Rex Weeks provides an excellent commentary on Hallowell's work and enables us to start to understand Ojibwa persons. Weeks revisited an important passage from Hallowell. Speaking as an Ojibwa, one might say, all other persons, human or other than human, are structured the same as I am. There is a vital part which is enduring and an outward appearance that may be transformed under certain conditions. All persons, too, have such attributes as self-awareness and understanding. I can talk to them. Like myself, they have personal identity, autonomy, and volition. Weeks stresses in his paper on Halliwell that there is a world full of persons that have human qualities such as an internal vital essence, self-awareness, personal identity, autonomy, and volition. Weeks suggests it follows from this perspective that a Western observer is likely to describe what they see, wherein from the cultural linguistic standpoint of the Ojibwa is going to be about who. I would like to emphasize that the perspective Weeks brings forward on a dualistic structure of persons, including both humans and non-humans, is not limited to the Ojibwa. This kind of personhood is common throughout the Americas and potentially even beyond. The recent research of Ferreros de Castillo on South American indigenous ontologies helps to reveal this widely shared pattern. Like Weeks, I think that the subtle but major linguistic shift towards talking about who we are studying is sometimes lost on other archaeologists who have written on indigenous materiality and the new animism, but still end their papers by discussing what they have, for example, pots and rocks. In the context of this symposium, I would really love to get to know who the bird effigies and mounds themselves are. Do the different mounds and bird effigies have different personalities? Were they organized within their own ranks according to authority or task? More importantly, how do they, as individuals, work with or against and help or hinder the kindred spirits? No doubt it is challenging to consider who we are looking at in archaeological context, but we might gain some interesting insights if we move a bit beyond what we found. In my own work, I have grappled with who a Plius red jar was that was placed reverently in a shaft below a water reservoir at Pucky May in terms of her social identity and social roles. I am not sure how well I understand her now, but I believe if we are going to consider persons, we might want to push ourselves a bit by asking who questions. Identity is another great anthropological topic, almost as old as animism. According to many anthropologists, social identity is multifaceted and situationally constructed to include aspects of age, gender, class, ethnicity, religion, and more. For example, Alfred Kroeber found that the Zuni, a southwestern Puebloan people, constructed their identities based on family units and membership in Kiva societies. Furthermore, the Zuni share an identity as members of the Zuni tribe, as southwestern Pueblo people, and even more broadly as Native Americans. According to T.J. Ferguson, individual Zuni people use all of these identities to define themselves in various social contexts. This pattern of hierarchically and horizontally organized and content-flexible identity is typical for humans. An individual will have many identities based on kinship, gender, age, ethnicity, occupation, and so forth. Identities are consequently malleable, are context-specific, and change over an individual's life. Notion of personhood necessarily involves issues of social identity, which will allow us to start to explore who material things were. In the last paper of the session, Andrew Siddell addresses identity in regard to Adena mounds and mound building. In many ways, his discussion of identity echoes Kroeber's thought on Zuni identity. Siddell concludes that the Adena in Kentucky had social relationships with their dead at a shared place, and it was likely that different corporate groups may, by this means, have taken on aspects of shared identity. Adena mound construction, alteration, and abandonment thus may have been motivated by the creation, transformation, and abandonment of such identities. Sadel's work is intriguing when considering how social relationships with the dead are used to create personhood, which is expressed materially. As I finished most of the mortuary papers by Smith and Carr, Novity, Carr, and Sadel, I was left wondering about who the corporate groups in Adena and Hopewell mounds were, and how having such reciprocal relationships worked. Chris Carr in his final paper said that mixed corporal souls in Hopewell charnel houses interacted with one another and the living. I was impressed with Carr pushing the theoretical envelope to further explore who these persons were in Hopewell burial context. Who they were appeared to be a collective of persons. He starts his discussion with how Cheyenne children are taught from an early age that family relationships follow our metaphor that blood is thicker than water. Similarly, when I was an undergraduate in the early 1990s, I had an Algonquian professor, Bill Hawk. He always stressed in his classes that Native Americans do not have a personal identity like Westerners. A tribal member was first considered his or her family and as his or her clan. Years later, I had an Osage student in one of my Native American classes, and she told my class that Professor Hawk's statement about being a family member still holds true today. She was emphatic that she first identified herself as her family. What I appreciated the most about Carr's findings was that he thought the multiple burials within a charnel house reflected the compositing of community members' souls and making of a corporate of souls. When I first read that, I thought, wow, that reminds me of my old Professor Hawk. Over the years, I have read about similar notions of composite souls working together. Ed Ladd, who was Zuni and an anthropologist, explained that Kachina dancers work together to bring rain. When a Kachina dancer dies, his essence travels to the village of the Kivas, where he is a Kachina spirit. His spirit becomes part of a corporate of souls that work together as breath and rain. They travel together as clouds. They bring rain. Ed Ladd once said that the saddest thing you will see is a lone cloud in the sky. That lone cloud represents a man who in life was not able to work with other men. A small cloud cannot provide rain by himself. It takes a village to make rain. Between Carr's works, Ladd's writing, and Hawk's teachings, I think we are beginning to see a pattern emerge that in some indigenous perspectives, souls must work together, at times even losing their individual identity. Let me provide some further examples. Based on Southwestern ethnographies, it is clear the earth itself, especially clay, has spiritual properties. Clay has its own unique personhood as an extension of the living earth. Southwestern potters assure us that clay has her own volition. The potter must learn how to interact with her. As the potter works with clay, their spirits intermingle, much like what Christopher Carr wrote about Cherokee tobacco rights. The cooperation of the 7 Cherokee clans was essential. Their cooperation was created and shown when the 7 tribal clans met, placed their clan tobaccos in one pile, stirred it, and smoked it in one pipe. Further, according to Carr, in a Huron ossuary example, bones were mixed and buried together to form one unit, similar to a pipe full of tobaccos. Like the mixing of tobaccos, our mixing of human bones, the intermingling of the human spirit with clay women creates a new, unique person in the form of a pot. Perhaps the basket loads of different kinds of dirt seen in woodland mounds were each considered sentient with their own breath life force. Perhaps human souls and artifact spirits were purposely fused with earth spirits to form new persons. As we think about the mixing of souls into one corporate body, there is no doubt that individual personhood in life was always related to one's family, and that personal identity changed through one's lifetime from childhood to puberty to adulthood and ultimately to ancestor and mortuary context. This transformation necessarily impacted both the living and dead and persons beyond the deceased individuals themselves. Taking this logic further, I wonder if woodland accretional mounds were similar to humans. Did they go through similar transformations from childhood to adult to ancestor? Perhaps a mound person, like a human, was thought to go from infancy established when a family was interred in a certain way to a more mature person with a different personality as another generation of a family was interred. Shifting into its final form, a mound might have transformed into a specific ancestral role in which it was no longer growing, but had achieved a permanence and accepted role that became immutable. Thus, through time, woodland people may have seen these accretional mounds as showing the development and interaction of collected persons as they supported, interacted with, and modified the dead they contain in the community of souls they helped to form. Chris Carr tells me that this possible indigenous logic dovetails well with the theoretical notions of mounds in their environs as persistent places, an idea explored by Siddell in his doctoral dissertation. In conclusion, human identity is always multifaceted. It is clear from the papers in this session that identity of non-human persons are likewise multifaceted and can also be explored through archaeological analyses. We can document who as well as what. Examples range from stone outline bird effigies to mounds to ritual interments of human beings and other than human beings such as mica essences perhaps. Many of the archaeological papers presented here illustrate how souls affected daily practice and how humans carefully negotiated with the souls. Drama unfolded in terms of bird spirits seen in bird effigies and of human spirits that were transformed in mortuary contexts. All the papers in this session did a wonderful job presenting ideas about personhood. Many Native American groups, as well as others, sometimes consider souls to be physical or mixed physical spiritual realities. As physical realities, they impacted and are impacted by the world of things and beings. The most significant contribution of this session, in my opinion, is the realization that personhood affected their communities. Human souls and other than human souls were placed together to work as a corporate of souls in a mound. Such mound souls were necessary for the well-being of woodland people. Thank you.